Hi, everyone. So earlier this year, as I'm sure everyone in this room did, we got very excited about the possibilities of using large language models in research. We had a wide number of sort of different use cases, opportunities, different tools and platforms that we were looking at. But we really wanted to do a project that would sort of tie all of them together and give us room to experiment and kind of room to fail. We didn't want to sort of sell this project. We wanted to do it pro bono, just in case anything went wrong. And that's where our client Vero came in. Vero are an edutech startup. They do hydroponic gardening programs for schools out in the US. Their program is about trying to not only kind of educate children about the importance of sustainability, but also helping them to kind of develop as people and kind of develop social skills and a wide variety of other things. What they wanted to do was to understand Gen Z's attitude to the environment. They also wanted to understand how they felt about the way that they were taught about the environment in school, and their kind of wider educational journey. They wanted to know whether students felt that like they were being equipped for the skills that they would need in the modern world. So all of these things were kind of contained within within the research. We ran a 15-minute online conversational AI chatbot survey. It's a bit of a mouthful. All in the US with about 800 people, all in April this year. We were able to do this research with the help of our partners in Next Intelligence. Phil and his team gave us some technology to work with, and Dash MMR provided us with a sample. So we were able to do the whole thing pro bono. And the aim of the research, as I said, was to try and use AI every single stage in the process. And the aim was to try and enhance our researchers' capabilities, not replace them, crucially. And I'll just give you a quick overview of sort of what we did at every stage. So we used an AI-assisted process to build our questionnaire. We used, as I said, a conversational AI chatbot survey in the data capture process. We used AI to do our quality assurance process to check the quality of the open ends that we received from participants in the panel. We used two different AI tools to help us in the analysis process to make sense of all of the open ends that we got from participants. And then we used AI at the deliverable stage to generate art for our reporting. So I'll go into each of these in more detail. I'll give you an example of how it worked, and I'll talk about sort of implications, some of the things we're thinking about for the future. So starting off with project setup, we used ChatGPT to inform and improve our questionnaire. Because we weren't doing a sort of upfront phase of qual, we wanted some information to sort of feed ideas into developing the questionnaire. So we got it to kind of give us sort of question ideas. We got it to generate response codes. We also sort of we used it to help refine question phrasing. To give an example, we asked ChatGPT to take on the role of a researcher and to imagine it was asking the question, what are some of the biggest environmental issues facing our planet today? And we asked it to give a set of response options, limiting it to 10 responses. And it gave us 10 really solid ideas, kind of condensing the most pressing environmental issues into 10 points. We obviously checked this with our client, who was an expert in sustainability, and the vast majority of the time, it gave us really good ideas of things that we could use in the survey itself. So what did we learn? ChatGPT is a fantastic tool, as I'm sure you all know, for assistive writing, and beyond ChatGPT, there are lots of tools like Quillbot or Grammarly, which help with sort of assistive writing. It's great for giving you ideas for questions, for kind of giving you thoughts about response codes you might not have thought of, and just generally a kind of survey refinement process as well. In the future, we've already heard about, how Copilot is being integrated into the Microsoft suite. Google will be doing a similar thing with the G Suite, and eventually, this built-in AI assistance will be in all of the software that we use on a day-to-day basis. We're already seeing, providers like Question Pro build a survey generator. I know Steve mentioned earlier some other providers that are building survey generators. I think there's also a role for AI in survey checking, going through a survey, checking the logic, checking your phrasing, even checking for typos, basic things. But I think there's a huge role for AI in helping to kind of kickstart the process of building materials for research. At the next stage, we used a conversational AI chatbot survey. So we used the Inca chatbot survey platform to create a really visually engaging and unique survey experience for our participants. This approach enabled us to ask AI-generated follow-up questions after open-ended responses. We were able to use some of the templated projective tasks that were available within the platform, and we used visual, emojis and creative interactive tasks that were all possible within the Inca platform. To give a sort of example of what a smart probe or a generated follow-up probe looks like, we asked the question, a scripted question: what do you think you can do to contribute to a better world? And I've given an example of one of the verbatims that we received back from a participant there, and they've talked about everything from picking up the trash and recycling, stop using so much water. There are lots of things that we can do to come together as a community and pull together. And the Smart Probe has asked a generative question. That's a great idea. What do you think would be the best way to get the community involved in these initiatives? So it's helped to kind of get that additional layer of detail. I think what it often enables is kind of getting people from the functional to the more emotional, or giving you the kind of rationale, or getting them to give more examples. It just gives more kind of depth in open-ended questions and surveys. So in this instance, the human has said, I feel like social media will be the key to reach out to a lot of people, trying to make groups and queuing people out to come out and help. To give an example of some of the templated projective exercises we used. So this is an example of the guided fantasy question type. And if you visualize a chatbot interface, so it's a sort of gray interface when you're responding in chat, the whole interface goes black, and this little GIF of a spaceship going towards a planet appears. So it's really kind of visually engaging and exciting. And you can put whatever image you like on that flag. And what we asked them to do is imagine that they were in a spaceship on their way to planet Erda, which has the environment of Earth in 50 years' time. And we asked them, what kind of thoughts are going through your mind? How do you feel and why? We then asked 2 follow-up questions where we said, okay, now you've arrived. What can you see? What does it feel like? Tell me about your experiences. And then a follow-up question to say, okay, now you're leaving. What would you say to people when you get home? Would you go back? How do you feel about the experience? And so on. And these sorts of questions, wouldn't necessarily ordinarily be asked in a quant environment. I think what chatbots enable you to do is kind of take some of the qualitative techniques that are rooted in conversational dialogue and take them into a quantitative environment. The other thing that AI allows you to do is to work with that sort of data at scale. You can process open-ended data and work with it and understand the themes within it very quickly. So that sort of enables this sort of projective questioning in that environment as well. So what have we learnt? We've learnt that chatbot surveys, as I said, are a great way of doing sort of hybrid qual-ish quant research. We've learnt that sort of generative probing is a great way of getting initial further detail from people on their motivations or on examples. Projectives at scale, it is sort of facilitated by both chatbot environments and AI-assisted analysis. What I think we'll see in the future is kind of multimodal response. Steve mentioned this earlier. I think voice will become the dominant form of open-ended response over text because it's just so much more natural than both text response and video response. I don't know if any of you ever regularly record selfie videos of yourself, but it's really weird. Unless you're an influencer, it's not a natural behavior in any way. You get a much better top-of-mind response when people are just speaking naturally. It also enables you to not forget the question because you're still looking at the text question in front of you rather than sort of getting lost in your own eyes. The other thing that I think we're increasingly seeing is sort of multi-turn probing, so letting the AI take over for a couple of turns, getting it to kind of probe a little bit deeper, even providing question-specific guidance to the AI about what your underlying objectives are for the question is something that I'm starting to see in tools. AI avatars is another thing that I know that we're going to be hearing about about in the next talk, so I won't talk about that, but that's something that we're increasingly going to start seeing soon as well. The next stage was data processing. So we used the GPT-3 API to conducted AI-assisted QA. This is back when GPT-3 was the latest thing, and you can see how fast things have moved on. We essentially assessed the quality of all of the open-ended responses by building a proprietary app using the API. We used the Google App script to build a custom verify response formula that asked the OpenAI API to generate a yes or no response to the, is this a real response, along with a rationale as to why it thought that. So you can see some examples here of real verbatim from the survey where the AI has said, yes, looks real, or no, seems like an unrelated statement, or no, doesn't make sense in terms of the question. This is something that's going to become much, much easier with, the arrival of sort of, the GPT store, or whatever OpenAI are going to call it. But we did this, much earlier in the year when it wasn't quite so easy. But yeah, so this is a great way of sort of using AI as a tool for quality assurance checking. So currently, this is something that we can do kind of after the fact, like after fieldwork, where you can do your data cleaning. You can use AI for translation, for transcription, for sentiment analysis. But I think in the future, we'll be able to do this, in much more real time. So real-time data cleaning, real-time bot identification, real-time transcription. I think something missing from voice response in surveys would be the immediate transcription of what you've just said and the ability to kind of edit it. Getting respondents to sort of do your work for you to a certain extent by getting them to feel like they are expressing themselves and being heard, in the right way. The next stage is analysis. So we used two different processes for this. We used a mix of tools. This approach enabled us to kind of get instant themes from open ends. We were able to do analysis of some of the conversational AI that we had used in the process, and we did that hybrid qual-quant analysis. So we used two things here. We used Inca's AI coding tool, which gave us real-time themes that were coming through from the open ends during fieldwork. So we were able to see some of the high-level categories that were coming through from the open end as fieldwork progressed. We could sort of drill into that. We could see what are the verbatims related to that theme. We could get a generative summary in natural language about what was happening within the data, and that was useful to kind of give us an initial read on what some of the thematic categories were coming out. Inca also provides ways of refining manually that the code frame. But what we were lacking was a way of sort of really drilling into that data qualitatively. So we used another platform which enabled us to import all of the data, all of the open-ended data, and sort of set the overarching question as kind of the moderator's voice, and all of the participant responses as individual responses to that question. And we could ask open-ended questions of the whole data set. So we could say, for example, what skill is talked about the most as being key for the future of the job market? And the generative AI summary has said, based on the research available, participants frequently mention the importance of understanding, technology skills, being proficient in various aspects of technology. And what we were able to use on this platform is we could click on any sentence within that summary and see the raw verbatim that has kind of been the source of that summary, with a sort of indication of how strong, that the text is in indicating that. So you can see there's different sort of gradients of purple there, and that sort of color indicates how closely that was sort of to the summary I've selected. So in the future, I think we'll increasingly be using AI for instant thematic coding, as we've heard in some of the earlier talks. I think AI is a brilliant tool for quote finding, so going through that process of deductive reasoning, finding the evidence for within the data set very, very quickly. It's brilliant at sort of revisiting data after the fact, particularly qualitative data. It's great at producing rapid summaries. The researcher has to do an overlay of interpretation. An AI can tell you what happened, but it can't necessarily tell you what's important, depending on what you're doing. I think at the moment, natural language programming is sort of, it works well for text, but it doesn't work so well with maths. It's not so good at kind of chart creation, but I'm sure that's something that could be fixed with sort of metadata. But I'm not an expert, but I'm sure we'll see that in the next year or so. Qual analysis at scale is something that we're already using it for. You know, it's brilliant for qualitative analysis, at least at the sort of deductive reasoning stage. And multimodal analysis is something else that I think is increasingly going to be common, both in terms of sort of video analysis and audio. So it can currently, when it works with audio data, it converts the audio to text, and then it works with that text at scale. With video, what it will be able to do is literally see what's happening on screen. So whether that be identifying objects, or whether it be being able to understand the context of what's being said in, you know, the focus group, let's say. So currently, if you get a focus group transcript, the transcript is an imperfect source of data. It can't tell you that during this part of the group they were referring to something on screen. But what AI will increasingly be able to do is see what's happening on screen. So it will have more contextual understanding of what's being said in the group as relates to what is being seen by the participants. It could also potentially be, you know, reading body language. It could see anything technically that's, you know, happening in the video itself. So that will be something that we'll increasingly start seeing in these tools. The last stage was in the deliverables. We used generative AI artwork from participant verbatim. So we used DALL-E 2. DALL-E 3 wasn't out at this point. We took verbatim from participant and adapted it into prompts that we fed into DALL-E 2, and then used the outputs in the reporting. So we used this projective question that I talked about earlier, where we asked about, you know, what will Earth look like in 50 years? And sadly, you know, a lot of the responses were pretty depressing. So things like, it's a place covered in litter, there's a mass pollution problem, massive natural disasters devastate this poor planet. So we took verbatim like that, we converted it into a prompt, we gave it a kind of stylistic goal. So in this case, we said a graphic novel style. In the example below, I think I asked for an oil painting impressionistic style. But it gave us, you know, really interesting ways of kind of bringing to life what people had said in a quant survey. So we know that we can use it for prompt inspiration. We can, as I think was demonstrated earlier, I think AI is great at sort of helping with persona creation, with segmentation. Not just kind of like producing the segments itself, but also naming them. I think real-time generative elements within surveys will become increasingly common, whether that be that kind of adaptive stimulus that was talked about earlier by Steve, or incorporating, rather than using verbatim from participants and feeding that into a generator, why not put the generator straight into the survey? There's lots of ways that you could use generative AI within the survey environment. Something I haven't seen yet, I'm sure it's out there, but infographic generators, just being able to give a couple of key stats, ask for a visual style, maybe give a brand identity, spits out an infographic. And I'm sure there's lots of other ways of using generative elements like music and film and so on that will help us kind of make more polished, professional-looking reports much more quickly. So what have we learned? What's the impact been? We've increasingly, adopted AI across the entire research process. We have a range of sort of different AI solutions that I won't go into in detail, but these are increasingly tools that we're sort of selling to our clients. We've also started developing a kind of more official AI policy, which is sort of geared around three core principles, which is security, using very research-specific closed systems, built with rigorous standards and our industry's needs in mind. Accuracy, being mindful of the limitations and the flaws of AI, always keeping the human in the loop to ensure that we're providing that really needed oversight. And flexibility. The use of AI tools is not mandatory. A lot of clients, will have differing rules about how they're allowed to use AI and how their suppliers are allowed to use AI. So we are flexible in the way that we use it. Not everyone has to use it. So what's next? I think, as I said, GPTs, sort of AI as a platform rather than a service is going to be the big thing this year. People building their own custom GPTs, creating custom data sets, custom training data. That marriage of synthetic and primary data that's sort of been talked about already, using potentially like trackers or segmentations to build custom data sets that can be used to build synthetic sample. That's something I think we'll see a lot. And then there's the kind of all-pervasive problem of survey fraud. AI is only going to make this worse, and it's going to be, as it always has been, just an ever-evolving race of trying to keep up with, what the kind of bot armies and what kind of bad actors are able to do. And I guess the sort of most immediate thing could be starting to use things like voice, but inevitably that's something that AI can do as well. So I've got no idea what the solution is. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. You said that when you were planning this, that you said to the researchers that this is about AI enhancing. Now you've done it. Do you think it is enhancing, or would it be replacing? And if it is enhancing, what will the researchers' main roles be? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think, as was talked about at the beginning, researchers, I think, need to become prompt engineers. I think that obviously core skills are so important as a layer of, being able to spot what good and bad looks like, particularly in terms of analysis. When we're talking about, let's talk about qualitative, having a sort of inherent understanding of the data is really important. And something I talked about at lunch with Tim was I think you sort of need an AI sandwich. You sort of need the human to kind of give the correct inputs. You need the AI to kind of do a lot of the kind of initial legwork and kind of get you 60% of the way. And then the human can sort of do the polishing, providing that curatorial, editorial role. And I think that's sort of the vision that I have of AI as a tool. I don't think that it does replace. I think it's a tool. We can just, as long as you're able to use the tool correctly, then it will be incredibly beneficial. But if you sort of bury your head in the sand and pretend that AI isn't happening, you will be replaced.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the audience?
Hi, Grace from Nordstat. Just a question in terms of like a commercial perspective. Do you think that the whole, well, obviously like this involves a lot of different things and it's a really comprehensive, holistic approach. And but then at the same time, the researcher allows researcher to spend less time and be more efficient on, throughout the whole process. So in terms of, the cost, does it make everything slightly cheaper or more expensive, or how do you position this to your clients?
I think there's sort of different ways of using AI. I think you can use it as an efficiency-making tool that would enable you to sell things cheaper. I wouldn't say that is our positioning. We want to use AI to help us to do things better. And sometimes that means spending the same amount of time or even more time, but just having the tools to do things much faster means that we can just do more of them. We can explore the data deeper. We can be more experimental in the way that we deal with it. We can, present it in kind of more engaging ways. So yes, I guess it does sort of make the whole process cheaper, but it just enables you to do the process better. I think the other thing to say is that I feel like AI almost helps us to catch up to the expectations that the unrealistic expectations that we've created with clients. Clients expect us to be able to, do bigger and bigger sample sizes and be able to deliver the information just as fast. Particularly when it comes to kind of qualitative work, the amount of clients that I've heard talk about, oh, we want robust qual, or we want qual at scale, but we want you to do it faster, or we want you to do it the same speed. AI just helps us to kind of catch up to a certain extent and deliver what we've said that we're going to deliver to a robust degree. That would be my response to that.
Hi, Jack, thanks. Just one quick question. You went through the different stages of the process. At what part of the process did AI have the most impact in your view?
Analysis. I think AI, the most immediate benefit that I see from AI is analysis. I think it just speeds up the whole process, particularly from a qualitative perspective. It just enables you to work with the data so much more efficiently. It enables you to sort of work with the data set in a more quantitative capacity, because you're able to not only sort of do your analysis across groups, across sessions. You can identify speakers. You can, you can attribute them segments, and it just enables you to work with that data much more efficiently. It also helps you to overcome availability bias, because the tendency of qual researchers especially would be to sort of work with what you have experienced. The emphasis is often on the things that you have moderated or you have observed. Obviously you can do brainstorms to kind of try and get what other people have seen, but I think this tool helps us to overcome that bias by being able to ask specific questions about the whole data set or about specific audiences. And I think, a lot, particularly for social clients that really want to make sure that they are representing everyone's opinion, having a tool that enables us to, at the reporting process, which could be weeks after doing the fieldwork, being able to very easily go back and, get a very focused response to a question is invaluable. So yeah, I'd say analysis was the biggest area.
Is that working? Thank you. 2 questions. Firstly, I worry about chatbots asking questions, because we know that what people say isn't what they do, and chatbots will just take say, and they won't understand do. And it's a very human thing to be able to interpret and understand the sort of where that may, where say works and where it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's point number 1. Point number 2, quite often we love to think that people, as researchers, that people take our research and do stuff and we change the world. But quite often we're just an insurance policy. Somebody's got a decision to make, and basically they want to buy some research so that if it goes wrong, they can blame us and not take the blame themselves. Mm-hmm. What happens then if you come back and say, well, why was it wrong? You say, well, computer said yes or no. So it's not a human, there has to be a human at the end of the thing, which I think you've addressed somewhat. Yeah. But it worries me that you're just saying, well, if your computer says yes or no, that's not really going to help a client have confidence in the decision that you've made unless they really believe that your computer is the best computer.
Yeah. Question 1. So I take issue with the current wave of startups which are selling qual at scale. It's not qual at scale, it's conversational surveys, and there is a difference. I think it's disingenuous to, like a technical definition of qual would be, just in-depth understanding or kind of contextual information. Technically, I guess you could argue that it is qual at scale in that respect, but when people think of qual, they don't really think of that technical definition. They think of in-depth conversations, focus groups, that kind of thing. And I don't believe you get the same thing from chatbot AI interviewing. That's not to say I don't think that approach isn't valuable. I would just say it sits between qual and quant, and it leans more towards the quant. It's a conversational survey. There is no social contract between the human and the AI. They're much more likely to get bored because they know there's no human on the other end who'll be annoyed with them. The AI is much more likely to ask them repetitive questions. It won't sort of spot an interesting tangent to go down. And as you say, it has no real understanding or empathetic, emotional understanding of what's being said. So I don't think it's the same. I agree with you. But I think that there is there's a role for qual, there's a role for quant, and there's a role for this sort of somewhere in between that kind of does something slightly different. Question 2, I've now completely forgotten what you said. It was about computer says no. So yes, I would say computer says no would be a real problem with synthetic data particularly, but this isn't synthetic data. This is just using AI to facilitate a fairly traditional process, but just with sort of, amends. So using AI in data capture with just, probing on the open ends, or using AI as a quality assurance checker, or using AI to help you work with that qualitative data at scale. So it is still humans who are answering questions. We're just doing it in a slightly different way, and we're trying to analyze it at scale. And we're not just taking what the AI tells us and putting it in front of clients. It's not generative analysis. It's generative summaries that help us to do our analysis and to add that extra layer of insight.
I think my concern is that if you get companies going to want to drive costs down, and just getting an AI bot to interpret a whole bunch of contextual data is where we may end up, because it's the cheapest thing to do, and that's where we may start running into sort of problems.
Yeah. I mean,
there's no issue anyway.
It could be, it could be, but I think you always need primary data to train the model, and I think the more that you work with these with AI tools, and they will get better and better, but I think at the moment, even though they are amazing, they're still producing very generic summaries, and they're just sort of doing reportage, and it's very difficult to separate what is reportage from what's interesting, what's important, what's different. And I think if, as a company, you kind of try and adopt AI and use it in that like human out of the loop way, you will sort of realize fairly quickly that what you're getting is not actually that interesting, and it's quite difficult to know what's important within it. So yes, maybe a couple of years down the line, all of this will be moot, and the AI will be so advanced, we will have achieved AGI, and we'll all be out of a job, but that will be a very different situation.
Is this going to work? Yeah. Hi. So I've got a two-part question as well, but hopefully quite straightforward to answer. Based on your experience from this experiment, which elements have you adopted as wholesale across the ways you run projects now at 2CB, and how have you taken researchers, the rest of your research team, on the journey with you to adopt these different technologies?
So it's been a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them wholesale. I'd say, as I said, analysis was the most sort of successful part, so that's something that's definitely been adopted by basically everyone. But as I said, adapted to the client that we're using it with. Other elements, less so. In terms of sort of your second question about, adoption, as someone who has spent his entire career trying to get people to adopt things, it's very difficult. It's really hard. And I think it always has to come through finding your bright spots, finding your champions, and getting the people who really believe in the technique and getting them to kind of be your advocates, really sort of working closely with them, so you're not just one person anymore. It's not just you parroting on about like, oh, we've got to use AI for everything. You really need to find people who share that passion, even if it's for a very small part of it. It helps with that gradual process, and eventually everyone's using it. So I went through that whole thing with online communities and autoethnography. Like everyone was like, no, focus groups, we should do everything focus groups. It's the same with AI. It's baby steps. And as I said, the sooner that they adopt it, the better for all of our sakes.
We're going to have to end there. I think you could have had many more questions, but thank you, Jack. Very insightful.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.